Nestled within a valley by a river of the same name, the village of Stiffkey is today an unspoilt rural area popular with tourists. The village has a long and fascinating history, reflected in its historic architecture, which dates from as far back as the Tudor period, with parts of the church originating from earlier still, dating from the late 13th century. However, the village holiday camp had its own story to tell. Popular with tourists during the summer months, people have been camping here at this location for over 70 years. The outbreak of the Great War in 1914 saw the area threatened with invasion, and during the late 1930s, preparations for war were once again underway. In 1937, this area was chosen by the War Office as the location for a gunnery training camp. Facing much opposition from local residents, including fishermen, who feared their livelihoods would be obliterated by constant gunfire, the camp was opened in May 1938 and saw many British troops receive their training in the art of good shooting throughout the Second World War. Overlooking the marsh was a row of 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft guns, from which trainee gunners would fire at sleeve targets towed by an aircraft from nearby RAF Langham. It was here in 1943 that the ingenious but simple corrective gun sight known as the Stiffkey stick was invented, which significantly improved the accuracy of the Bofors gun. Following the end of the war, the camp continued to remain in use up until 1955, when Lieutenant Colonel Nelson suddenly received orders to close the camp, spelling the end of an era for Stiffkey. Today the camp is owned by the Harrison family, who bought the site in the early 1960s. Now the site of a popular holiday camp, the Nissen huts have been replaced by caravans, and much of the site has been returned to agriculture. However, a number of original buildings remain. The original guardhouse now forms the office for the holiday camp. A number of other ex-military buildings, including the former chapel, now form workshops and storage space for local boat builders George and David Hewitt, who have been working here for over 25 years.
We had one shed originally, which is the shed over the other side there, which had the barber's shop in the corner, so we was told. There's a small concrete bit in the corner there, and that was the barber's shop. Well, we're sitting in front of the naffy at the moment, where all the food was cooked and all the sort of soldiers were fed in here. And still part of the counter is still all in there. We have also got another shed over there which has got a brick part to the end of it, which was the butcher's shop, so we're told. It's got sort of some white panels up in the roof, and that was painted white on the outside in the original colours. There's the chapel. When we came here, part of the cross was still up on the top of the end of the building, but the crossbar had fell off, but the upright was still there.
The former chapel currently houses another piece of Second World War history.
We are restoring a lifeboat called the Lucy Livers. She was brand new in 1940, and she was the Aldborough No. 2 boat. And one of her very first trips was to Dunkirk to rescue soldiers who were stranded on the beaches there. All the lifeboats from Great Yarmouth all the way down the east coast all went across, and the ones along the south coast, along with hundreds of other little boats, big boats, all sorts, anything what would float, they took, towed and got across there to rescue all the soldiers.
The Lucy Livers is being restored thanks to the formation of a new maritime heritage charity, Rescue Wooden Boats, who have recently taken over the former officers' mess. Originally built as an H-block, only part of the officers' mess survives, as the former kitchens were taken down after becoming too dilapidated to maintain. However, work has been undertaken on the remainder of the building, which once housed a bar and dining hall. The rattling crystal windows have been replaced by modern double-glazed units, while the interior has been transformed into a small museum and visitor centre for those interested in the local maritime heritage. But despite the transformation, some original features have still managed to stand the test of time, as landowner Mark Harrison explains.
So we're now going into the ante-room, which has got an attractive little fireplace. So obviously I think the officers' comfortable quarters, I would think, with a small bar service unit here, and the other little room behind it would have been the service bar. Further through the other rooms, I don't honestly know what they were. One further one has another fireplace in, so I think why the different rooms I am not certain, and I can't tell you. But if we like to go around and have a look at the other room, we can.
The far end of the building is built of brick and is now a storage area for the holiday camp.
This we've used just for storage, for the campsite bits and pieces. And there's another small fireplace in here. Perhaps a little stove built in the corner. Still the old linoleum, I think it was, properly.
Other buildings are now used for agricultural purposes, with some original buildings now replaced by modern metal structures. But dominating the skyline is the original camp hall, which remains pretty much unaltered. Now used as an agricultural store, the hall was once renowned for its popular dances, attended by local civilians as well as military personnel.
Oh yeah, you had people come from Wales and Blakeney and all over the dances. They had a band, you see, nice stage with all the curtains and everything, yeah. And the films during the week as well, films during the week.
Today, the projector is replaced by an ageing corn dresser. But although the building was used as a grain store for many years, there are still remnants of its former life hidden throughout.
We came in, the ladies on the left, locked at the moment, but nobody in. This is all the modern switchgear from the grain store that we put up in here in 1963. Gents on the right, and then if you look through the front of you was where you can see two sets of staircases there, and again on your right, which were to a second story and for the stage that was out in the front of the hall. The dance floor, I've always told, was one of the best in Norfolk, and many people used to come here, not necessarily connected with the army, but used to come here for dances. But this is obviously the gents, and that was the original, still the original gents in there. Very well made. Everything was beautifully made.
Mark leads us upstairs to the first floor.
This was the office. It says on the door, and no lights in that one.
Next door to the office was the projection room.
So this is the projection room, and they were obviously where the projection was shown onto the screen, which would have been at the further end of the building on a stage, and must have been a roll down, I imagine, that the old-fashioned screen would have been a roll down one.
Mark takes us into the former winding room, where some interesting items remain.
That, I should think, is original army. Little something to do with widening the screen or something. The original army.
Back on the ground floor, Mark takes us into the main hall.
The main thing of the hall, which everybody has been very interested in, is the 4 murals on each side of the building, which were done by a guy called J.E. Vincent in March and April 1946.
Depicting scenes of historic battles, the main hall is surrounded by elaborate murals painted by a man called John Vincent. Painted just after the war, could this have been the result of a bored national serviceman?
I've always presumed that he was probably a national serviceman here, but it must have taken him a long while to do his paintings.
But I remember him doing it for weeks and months, yeah. Very talented man. Well, you see, he would be, he could still be alive.
During the early 1950s, there was an American presence at the camp, as Britain was under threat from yet another war. The Americans occupied an area of land to the west of the main camp, constructing a number of buildings to accommodate troops training for air-to-air combat. Today, the only remaining building is a former cookhouse. But that's not the only thing left behind by the Americans. Those heading west from Stiffkey along the Norfolk coast path will come across a complete circular ring of tarmac track on the edge of the marsh. At its centre stands a peculiar steel structure with an arm protruding from its centre. Embossed with the word radioplane, remnants of electric cabling can be seen. Known locally as the Whirlygig, this curious landmark continues to baffle both locals and tourists alike. Fascinated by the mystery surrounding it, RAF veteran Fred Butcher has been researching the Whirlygig for a number of years.
I was mystified about it being called the Whirlygig. So on one occasion I found myself in conversation with a local man who said he'd been there for many years, living in the Stiffkey area, and he said, "Oh, we call it the Whirlygig because queen bees were flown from here during the war." Well, the more I heard this, the more I thought that's not true, because like almost all RAF trained pilots, I put in my early years on tiger moths, and I realised immediately that it was impossible for a tiger moth to fly around such a small circle with the intention of gaining flying speed. And so there therefore had to be another explanation, and I wondered what it was.
With faster aircraft in the skies during the early Cold War, the Americans had developed a new type of aerial target capable of simulating the vast range of scenarios encountered when under attack from enemy aircraft.
They used on occasions fly aeroplanes from there that were very small, made an unbelievable amount of noise, and dived about as though they were being flown by drunken airmen.
The Whirlygig is actually a rotary launcher built in 1952 for launching radio-controlled aerial targets, which were miniature aircraft flown over the marsh and designed to be shot out of the sky by the trainee gunners, simulating air-to-air combat. Overlooking the marsh was a 5-gun training simulator, replicating the guns of a B-29 bomber. Flown by American Air Force personnel, these small pilotless planes were seen as an effective replacement for the conventional towed targets used during the Second World War. So how did the Whirlygig work?
The idea was you took a small aeroplane, sat it on a trailer, started the engine, and under its own air screw it would then pull itself up to flying speed when a toggle was released which allowed it to fly away under the remote control of a man operating the controller.
Once airborne, the plane would then land on command or automatically if the fuel ran out, descending by parachute. However, landings were often eventful with reports of the planes crashing into nearby buildings.
One of them crashed in the row of houses that got out of control of the radio control, crashed in the row of houses at Boatman's Row, and I lived in the middle house, and I went through the roof. Luckily the old lady went there, but they used to shoot, they used to shoot at it. But that was a rare super aircraft what they had.
Whenever an RCAT descended on the marshes, the Stiffkey marshes, of course, there developed quite a race amongst the locals. For the ladies, it was the opportunity to get hold of large areas of what was called silk, which of course was what 900 really represented. Or else, of course, for the men, if they could obtain a small quantity of petrol, which was in very short supply, that was much favoured and added to their replenishments for fishing boats and the like.
After just 2 years of use, the launcher was mysteriously abandoned, and in 1955 Lieutenant Colonel Nelson suddenly received orders to close Stiffkey Camp, spelling the end of an era for the village.
Well, that was a sad day for a lot of people. That was a sad day for a lot of the business people,
By the time the camp closed, the village grew to appreciate the benefits the camp brought to the community.
Really and truly, all the people, we had people come here where we'd been in the same predicament as we were, and they were up in arms, but they said, as far as they're concerned, that's the best thing ever happened, because they mixed in with the village, and don't think the village looked after the playing fields, and so that was a bit sad.
Today the village relies mainly on tourism, with a large number of holiday homes across the village. Even the camp's former medical quarters benefit from being converted into holiday accommodation. But after over 70 years of withstanding the elements, many of the other remaining military buildings are showing signs of decay.
Well, we've got most of the sheds now that there are left, but the windows are getting very bad now. You'll see some of these in these pictures that are very rotten, and we made fiberglass panels and put over most of them because the windows just kept falling out. Every time there was any wind, all the windows fell out. So these are the last ones which we have got to do. Probably this summer we'll make some panels up to put over them.
Nearby, at the former officers' mess, rescue wooden boats intend to include an area devoted to the history of the camp as part of their heritage displays, ensuring that this important part of history is not forgotten.